Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Well, hello, and welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm so thrilled that you're here joining me today because I'm sharing with you a really valuable interview, a conversation that I had with Adam Keene a couple years ago, a few years back. So it's a bit of a rerun, but it is a really valuable conversation. We're talking all about pranayama and the importance of cultivating a regular breathwork or conscious breathing practice, how it starts to change and transform your nervous system and also your entire personality, actually. There's been so many amazing testimonials and experiences of people who, when practicing a regular pranayama practice, especially one that has been created particularly for them, for their constitution, for the challenges that they're facing in their own lives or in their own body, in their own nervous system, in their own experience, how it's actually helped them to create greater focus, to tap into a greater source of energy, to feel clarity in their mind, in their thinking, as well as to sleep better and deeper, and also reduce those feelings of anxiety that can come up periodically throughout the day. You know, for me, my pranayama practice is so vital. It's so important. It's even more important than an asana practice, actually, because at the end of the day, you know, it really doesn't matter if you can get your legs behind your head or back bend and grab your knees. What actually really, really matters is how you feel internally, because that translates into how you treat others. And so if you're regulated, if your nervous system is calm and at ease and relaxed, then you can also co-regulate others. And so people feel calm in your presence. You're also able to respond rather than react to stimulus in your environment. And this makes you more conscious as a human being, as an individual. And this is something that will actually translate into real life benefits for you versus just having the flexibility and strength in your body, which I guess translates as a beautiful body. But at the end of the day, we're all going to age and we're all going to face death. So why not do it with a sense of grace and ease and peace, feeling really, really good at a fundamental level inside, in your nervous system, in yourself. And honestly, the best way to do this is through breathwork, and this naturally leads to meditation. So we're going to talk all about this in the podcast today. I can't wait. The sound is a little bit funky. We've done our best to re-edit the original audio sound from 3 years back. So hang in there if it's a little scratchy, but the content and the information is incredible. So I know you're going to love it and just receive so much benefit from listening to our conversation today. So let's just jump right in.
Harmony, welcome.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to chat with you.
You're the first guest, and so the first guest back for a second time, I think, and over 50 since you were first on.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm no better at it than I was at the start. So this time, Harmony's come on to talk about pranayama. She's actually doing a course. So we want to talk more about the benefits of pranayama. I think particularly the lockdown, people are getting very much into focusing, I think, more and more on the pranayama, actually. I'm finding it's coming up more and more in what people are telling me they want and what they're practicing. So let's just go from step one, Harmony, from the basics. why bother doing pranayama in the first place?
That's a great question.
Why do we need to be doing pranayama as well as all that asana practice? Is the asana practice the kind of point? Is that not enough?
In a way, if you're doing a very slow asana practice with a lot of awareness to breath and breathing, I think it does have similar benefits to a pranayama practice. But I think more often than not, we tend to kind of rush through the asana practice, especially if you're doing a full series, a full sequence. You feel like, oh, I got to get this done. This is 2 hours of my time or an hour and a half of my time. It can almost actually do the opposite than what we want it to do, right? It can kind of stress us out more, or we practice in a way rather than starting to trigger our parasympathetic nervous system, which will help us to relax and de-stress. We end up practicing in a way where we're actually just reinforcing those negative patterns of the sympathetic nervous system. We feel then almost more stressed out rather than less stressed out afterwards. And then, we don't rest for long enough. We think, oh, I got to go. I got to get on with my day. So if we're able to practice in a way that's very slow and we have a lot of awareness on the breath and don't feel rushed or pressured, then definitely it's going to have more benefits than just practicing in a way that's very mechanical or rushed or feeling like you have to fit so much in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting, that more people are wanting to learn about pranayama and breathing. And I think it is because people are feeling very stressed out. They're starting to experience some of the negative side effects of being stressed all the time because we're at home and, all these different emotions come up and feelings. And when we have those types of emotions and feelings, and we have sort of this low level of chronic stress, chronic inflammation arising in our bodies, then often we don't even feel like doing a strong practice, right? You just don't have the energy or the motivation or the desire to do a strong asana practice because you're already not feeling good.
So is the yoga breathing that we know well, generally, unless we're an oral teacher, we don't call it a ujjayi breath anymore. The yoga teachers still like the idea of ujjayi, but we're not calling it that way. But the yoga breath, anyway, that's not enough. Is it we do it slow enough, or is it a precursor to understanding the pranayama? How does it fit in, what we know as breathing, to what you know better, as pranayama?
Well, definitely, I still like to call it ujjayi breathing because ujjayi,
cool.
Ujjayi just means breath with sound. It just means with sound. It's actually not really a Sanskrit word in a way. It's referring to lifting up the sound jai. And so, you would see in India when people are celebrating or they're affirming something, they're like jai, right? Hanuman jai, this kind of celebratory, making a noise. And so ujjayi just means with noise or with sound. And I think what happened is there is a particular pranayama practice in the Hatha Pradipika that's called ujjayi pranayama. And it's named ujjayi pranayama based on breathing with this sound breathing, where you're slightly constricting the glottis and you're making that sound as you breathe. And Pattabhi Jois would call it ujjayi breathing because it was to be breath with sound. And so we're to use that same kind of breathing. And I think somewhere along the way, Sharat decided to stop calling it that because it's not in reference to this particular pranayama.
Yeah, I suppose the early days, we were encouraged to breathe a lot louder than we are now, right? I mean, you really were encouraged to make quite a racket. Now, I mean, but that's not really cool, to make up, and kind of really strong
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely maybe the breath was stronger before than many people breathe now.
Now, someone does that in the room and everyone's looking around. Who's that joker in the corner breathing really loudly? They're saying to me as a teacher, stop them breathing so loudly. They're distracting me. Early teachers, who was I an interview? Maybe it was David Swenson or, back in the kind of the Hawaii days, they were really saying, the whole room was very strong kind of pumping kind of breath sound, right? Anyway, a slight aside, but so we were talking about the calming breath, the idea that when we practice slowly, we would have, maybe some kind of segue into more of the territory you're thinking of in pranayama. So if the pranayama there to calm or to invigorate, what's the purpose?
Yeah, basically with pranayama practice, you're doing a couple of things simultaneously. So one of the main benefits, I would say, is that you're starting to stimulate or tone the vagus nerve. And there's been a lot of talk about the vagus nerve. Eddie talks about it a lot. But anytime you start to talk about breathing and the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight nervous system that shows up as a response to stress, right? It's not a bad thing. It's only bad if you can't get out of that system. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake to the sympathetic nervous system, right? It helps to turn off the sympathetic nervous system and move into a more relaxed, they would say maybe rest and digest type state. So whenever we're looking at pranayama, we're working directly with the autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system together. And so even when you look at the nadis, like the Ida nadi and the Pingala nadi, which correspond to the left and the right nostril, they're also corresponding to the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. And so we are working directly with starting to tone and balance the nervous system. When we breathe with this breath with slight sound, we're also stimulating that vagus nerve, which helps to strengthen our parasympathetic response. And then we become more able to switch out of that sympathetic nervous system. So it has a very positive effect. So really it is about calming the body and the mind. And it has all kinds of benefits like lowering blood pressure, improving digestion, increasing blood flow, decreasing blood pressure. And it helps to reduce inflammation in the body, which, chronic inflammation has been shown to lead to all kinds of autoimmune disorders like arthritis or psoriasis or lupus, asthma, thyroid imbalances, hormone imbalances. So there's so many positive benefits from sitting and breathing and really working directly with your nervous system.
Is that the way that it was originally formulated? Because it strikes me that pranayama, like yoga practice, has now been very much put into the domain of practical health and practical health benefits. But the way you're talking seems to suggest that the yogis were doing it for that reason. Do you think that's the case? Or do you think they were also doing it to kind of almost do the opposite in a way, to stimulate the body using the pranayama? Can it be used in that function as well?
It is interesting.
Kumbakas and things like that people that, they could have, they like to impress us with holding the breath in and holding the breath out for long times. And that doesn't seem very relaxing.
No. So this leads to sort of another interesting, divergence that my path took, because even though I practiced pranayama with Pattabhi Jois in 2007 and learned from him, I also had been studying since 2004 with Sri O.P. Tiwari, who was at that time the head of the Kavalyadam Institute in Lonavala, India. And his teacher, his guru, Swami Kuvalyananda, had started the first research institute in India, researching yoga and the practices of yoga. And so from learning from the Kavalyadam lineage with Sri O.P. Tiwari, he always would press upon that you should never feel stressed out doing the pranayama practices. You shouldn't be turning on your sympathetic nervous system. It shouldn't be creating any irritation or aggravation or stress in the system where you feel a little bit irritable later in the day even, right? It can show up not necessarily immediately, but later in the day you feel more stressed out or more irritable, or just like your mood is a bit off. And that would be like a negative effect. And it would mean that you're pushing too hard, too fast, holding your breath for too long, or like there's something going on in your breathing practice that is putting stress into your nervous system. And the thing is you can't awaken Kundalini. So the yoga masters of old, the ones writing the Hatha Pradipika, weren't necessarily concerned, they're not writing about the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. They're not necessarily concerned so much with the physical anatomy, but they did have this energetic understanding of the body. And Kundalini isn't going to awaken if you're out of balance. And so the all of the practices is about cleansing, bringing your body into a state of balance so that you can have this deep spiritual experience. But if you're stressed out, you're not able to have a deep spiritual experience because your, body's freaking out, basically.
So they're all there for balance, all the different breaths. Because I just thought, if the breath was just there to calm and balance and regulate the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, we would just have one long breath, just sit there, breathing kind of out for a long period of time and relax. Or is there another side of it? Why are we doing these breath retentions? Or is that different to what you're teaching?
No, definitely the breath retentions are a part of it. That has to do with the exchange of gases like the CO2 and nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is released. It actually kind of lives in our sinuses a little bit. And so when we're practicing the pranayama, it is released in a greater quantity than just when we're breathing regularly. And what it helps us to do is it helps to enhance the amount of oxygen that is being taken up in the blood. And it also helps to open our airways. So it can be really important for people with asthma or some cardiovascular system issues because it helps to open up blood vessels and also take in more oxygen. And then the CO2 is also a really important factor in the breathing because it is the buildup of CO2 levels in our blood, in our body that instigates, creates the urge for us to breathe. And so with the pranayama practice over a long period of time, you're increasing your tolerance to CO2. And CO2 can be very helpful in many ways in our body. We need it in order to take in oxygen from the blood as well. But it also helps to dilate our smooth muscles, our arteries, our intestines. It also helps to reduce histamine production. And so that helps to lower the inflammation, the inflammatory markers of the body. And it also controls our body's pH. So CO2 levels need to be maintained at an optimum rate. And sometimes, we think that if you just breathe faster, like by hyperventilating, you're doing fast breath, that you're going to get more oxygen, but it's actually the opposite happens, right? You actually end up blowing kind of off your oxygen and it decreases the amount of oxygen that your body's able to absorb from that exchange because you're imbalancing the CO2 levels. So it's really important to have that long, deep breath and increasing the length of the exhalation has been shown to stimulate the vagus nerve and to increase vagal tone and also to then bring down that stress response. And it immediately starts to increase that parasympathetic nervous system. So it will decrease your stress basically right away, which is amazing because if you've ever, been feeling anxiety or a lot of stress or you're feeling irritable and you just stop and slow down your breath and create that ratio of 1 to 2 breathing. So maybe taking like a 4-second inhale and an 8-second exhale. If you can do something like that for even just 1 or 2 minutes, you will notice immediately a response in your body. And so I think there's tools in the pranayama practice that are easily accessible at any time that will help to decrease these negative stress responses in the body that you don't have to do an 1.5 hour asana practice to get that effect. You could just sit and breathe for 2 minutes and potentially tap into that same neurological
But could we not
effect.
do this in our asana practice? Could we not include some kind of pranayama-esque aspect of breathing? Or is there something we can learn from the pranayama and from the way that you were talking to include it in the asana practice so that the breath is adequate, right? We shouldn't be going away from an asana practice being more stirred up. So maybe for some people, it should be a longer out breath, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're in a position or a posture where you're really challenged, it would be of benefit to really focus on your breathing and to make that exhalation a little bit longer. I'm hesitant to say that you should change the way that you're breathing in the asana practice because Pattabhi Jois and Sharad have both been very adamant, that the inhale and the exhale should be even in length. So, I'm not going to suggest otherwise. If you're practicing a traditional Ashtanga practice, then you should definitely keep the breath even in length. But slowing the breath down, Pattabhi Jois would say you should breathe in like a 4-second inhale, 4-second exhale, like that, so that it's not so slow,
Slow.
but it's pretty slow, right?
Pretty slow. Yeah, absolutely. Huh.
I mean, and not that he would always follow his own advice, because he definitely was known for teaching full primary in 50 minutes, which is like maybe a 2-second inhale or exhale.
Yeah. Which definitely wasn't relaxing in any way.
No, not really. You needed to go home and take a 2-hour nap after that.
I mean, I did practice with Pattabhi Jois, but I wasn't privy to the pranayama as you were, which is an amazing experience you must have had. How are the differences between the way that you got taught with Pattabhi Jois and the latest teachings you had at Cavalli down with Tuaraji?
Yeah. So that's another interesting difference, because Pattabhi Jois really, he didn't teach pranayama until students were in advanced series. And so in the Ashtanga tradition, we tend to have this, I guess, preconceived idea or misconception maybe that pranayama is dangerous to practice unless you're an advanced asana practitioner. And the way that Pattabhi Jois would teach pranayama is he would go immediately into very long breath retentions, inhales and exhale retentions right away. So it wasn't relaxing, I wouldn't say. It was quite stressful for the nervous system, especially if you weren't ready to be holding your breath for that length of time.
Why was he doing that? It seems then to suggest again that this idea of pranayama as something other than relaxing, as something to stir up Kundalini was there in his mind.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know why he took that approach to pranayama. I never, got into a conversation with him about that. But, definitely there's benefit in having those long breath retentions. However, there's more benefit if you build up gradually to those breath retentions and don't stress your nervous system out, because, things can go off when you're putting direct stress on your nervous system.
And
so that's where there's all these precautions about doing pranayama, right? Like, you don't want your hair to turn gray or...
don't do pranayama at all even, right? I think people are really...
Yeah, but
I think it's a myth that's been busted really now. And also because I think people like you are talking about it in more pragmatic terms, that, in more kind of taking it towards the scientific realm as well, where it's not this mythological thing that could kind of send you crazy. And, it's approached in maybe more of a sensible way,
Yeah, that's the thing. If you do too much too soon, it could potentially maybe not make you crazy, but you could develop some issues, right? You could develop like a tremor. You could develop coughing or chronic hiccups or like disrupted breathing where you're like, gasping for breath every once in a while. You could develop some physical issues, digestive issues, different like irritable bowel type issues. So there's things that can happen because you are working with your nervous system, right? So you do want to go really gradually, really slowly, and therapeutically, because the whole point of practicing pranayama in my mind is that you are having a very deep experience of yoga, but it needs to be done in a way that is calming and centering and grounding for your central nervous system, for your autonomic nervous system, so that your body stays in balance and you stay healthy. If you throw yourself out of balance, then you have to take so much time trying to bring yourself back into balance. And, that's kind of a side route. And if you keep taking side routes, then you never get to where you want to go.
And you studied with Sri Dietary for a number of years as well. I think quite a few years, right? And what would you say the essence of what you learned with him? How did he teach? And what did you come away with after studying so long with him?
Yeah, so he really taught in a very gradual way. So students would just start with inhaling and exhaling for double. Inhale, exhale for double. And that's a really easy, simple way if, you're looking for just like a first initial exercise to start breathing or start a pranayama or breathwork practice. Yeah. So if you could inhale for 3 seconds and exhale for 6 seconds, or inhale for 4 seconds and exhale for 8 seconds.
Preempted a further. Yeah. Okay. So the basic, a basic pranayama, if we just take a side kind of divergence, would be that as a kind of gateway. Let them exhale back.
Exactly. And if you're able to breathe in for 4 seconds and breathe out for 8 seconds, in 5 minutes, you can do 25 breaths. Or if you do 10 breaths, I think that's 5 breaths is 1 minute, basically. And which decreases your breathing rate from normal quite significantly.
That's going to take ages. What happens if you've only got, what happens if you only got 10 minutes? What do you do then? Like if you only got 10 minutes a day and you want to start pranayama, what would be the practice?
Yeah, I mean, in 2 minutes, you could do 10 breaths, inhaling for 4 seconds and exhaling for 8 seconds. That would take 2 minutes and you would immediately feel benefits from that.
What happens if you don't feel anxious, but you feel a bit sluggish or depressed even? Would you do the opposite? Or what other thing could you do then?
Well, again, in the Hatha Pradipika, there's 8 main types of pranayama practices. And each of these different types of pranayama practices have slightly different effects on the body, depending on whether you're stimulating the Ida Nadi or the Pingala Nadi. So you can increase your sympathetic response a little bit by stimulating the Pingala Nadi more than the Ida Nadi. So it will increase heat in the body. It will also decrease the negative effects of vata. So maybe anxiety, say, or excess dryness or brittleness in the body. And there's cooling pranayamas. So the Shitali or the Sitkari, many people are familiar with these. Inhaling through the lips and then exhaling through the nose. So you're inhaling through your mouth and exhaling through your nose. And they're immediately effective for bringing down, excess heat or acidity in the body as well. So each of the different types of pranayama practices have specific effects, but in general, all of them will be helpful to you. But if you are having a particular, negative symptom or something coming up, then some will be more effective than others.
Do you need to adamantly learn them with a teacher, or can you do a bit on your own?
I think if you're just doing something very simple, like inhale and exhaling for double, you could probably just do that on your own. Right. It's not very difficult or complicated. It's just learning to lengthen your exhalation. But I think if you really wanted to develop a pranayama practice, it's absolutely something that you need a teacher for. I don't think it's very productive to just read books or listen to audio cassettes or watch videos or read articles. I think it's something you really need to have that interpersonal relationship with someone.
Without sounding like a heathen, when you talk about deepen, where do you go after relaxation? How do you know you're doing it right or that you are progressing with it? Or what do you see as a sign of progress?
Yeah, over months or years, depending on how long it takes. But definitely you'll notice, because right now our brains are trained to have a certain breath capacity, right? So when you first start paying attention to your breath, you might only be able to breathe in, say, for 3 seconds and exhale for 6 seconds. But after a month, if you're doing that consistently, you're able to all of a sudden breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 8 seconds. So you're going to increase your breath capacity over the months and years. And then also you're going to increase your ability to retain the breath as well, to hold the CO2 in the lungs over the months and the years. But it's important to start gradually. So you're not going to try and inhale past your capacity and then hold the breath for a long time and then exhale and come out gasping or, completely losing it, because there's no benefit to that. But if it's done in a very systematic, scientific way, it's measurable, right? You can see your growth happening, because where before holding the breath for, say, 4 seconds was really challenging, maybe after several months, holding the breath for 8 seconds feels quite natural. So you can notice these incremental changes, but also I feel that when you practice consistently the breathing practices, it really helps to tone the vagus nerve. So you increase your vagal tone, which means you can switch more easily between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So you don't get stuck in that place of being chronically stressed as much, right? So you're able to come out of that more readily, more easily.
And when you talk about, kind of developing the longer breath or holding the breath in more, this is the benefit of decreasing CO2 levels and increasing oxygen levels for the body and the blood. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it does both, actually. So you're able to hold the CO2 levels for longer, which have actually quite a calming effect on your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, with that, it allows your body to absorb more oxygen out of the blood. So therefore, you're taking up more oxygen from each breath. So there's a whole bunch going on with the gas exchange when you're holding your breath. But if you don't have that capacity to hold the CO2 in the lungs, then it forces you to breathe out, right? So you're not going to be able to hold your breath for a long period of time. And of course, there's all kinds of mystical states and experiences. And this is where you get sort of the Kundalini awakening or this Shakti energy awakening through being able to hold your breath in a safe way for longer periods of time, or you get these Kaivalya Kumbhakas, which is sort of being able to retain the breath without inhaling or exhaling in a suspended state, again, without feeling the need to breathe. And so this is what the yoga texts talk about.
Yeah, I think if you do that for 10 minutes, you're enlightened or something like that. If you can.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
How many minutes can you hold your breath for?
For me, personally, that's the thing, there's not really a very ego gratifying situation with pranayama. Nobody really likes to look at it on Instagram.
I would be really impressed with that. I don't think it would fit in a reel, really, because I think you've only got 30 seconds in a reel. But you did a long video and you just held your breath. Yeah, I would watch that.
Yeah.
Any pointers for how to start? I mean, where to put the breath, where to aim the breath, how to feel the breath, the quality of breath? Any little tips for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think, breathing with that sound, making a little bit more conscious effort to breathe with sound, but it shouldn't be harsh. It should be soothing, it shouldn't be really intense. It should feel soothing to yourself while you're breathing. That's one of the really good ways to start to stimulate, the vocal cords, to stimulate that vagus nerve while you're breathing, and then lengthening the exhalation to be double the inhalation. And like I said, if you do that for 4-second inhale, 8-second exhale, 10 breaths will take you 2 minutes. So that's very straightforward and simple and easy to do that. That deep, slow breathing, using the diaphragm to really breathe. So feeling the expansion of the rib cage in all three directions, that 3-dimensional breathing into the back of the lungs, the sides, the fronts, the tops. And then also even connecting to the bandhas. So that's the other benefit, I think, that is sort of a side benefit of the pranayama practice, is you really start to develop awareness of mula bandha and this, lifting and squeezing of the pelvic floor, the anal sphincter, this contraction of the pelvic floor muscles. And the interesting thing is the vagus nerve terminates at the pelvic floor. And so again, it's another switch, the mula bandha, for stimulating and increasing vagal tone. So it helps to create that parasympathetic response. So with the breath, trying to, connect to the bandha at the bottom of the exhale, you can kind of squeeze the anus or squeeze the pelvic floor and then try to hold and maintain that connection while you're breathing in. And then you don't have to try so hard when you're exhaling, because it starts to happen actually automatically at the bottom of the exhalation.
Do you need to use the bandhas for the breathing practices?
I would say yes. You should definitely focus on bandhas, having that. And I think that's why Pattabhi Jois really didn't teach pranayama until students were well acquainted with the bandhas. And you don't get so much into advanced series unless you've done a lot of work with the bandhas in primary series and second series, especially practicing in Mysore, India. There's no workarounds.
Is the pranayama practice or the practices that you are teaching, are they different to just breathing practice? Because you see a lot of people talking about teaching breathing now, and then there's pranayama.
Mm-hmm.
Are the two things different? Classical pranayamas and then, breathing for health, or is one a diluted version of the pranayama here somewhere, or are there some kind of westernized versions of breathing that are different to the pranayamas?
Yeah, that's a very good question also. I think that, I obviously don't know all of the the breathing or breathwork practices that are out there, but from what I've seen, there's for sure some overlap. So some practices I think would be considered a traditional pranayama practice. And then there are some differences also where the breathwork practice is, not really from a traditional yogic lineage. It's something that's maybe a little bit new, a little bit modern, maybe Western. I'm not sure. So, I get lots of questions about like Wim Hof breathing and things like that.
Yeah.
That's quite different from like traditional yogic breathing.
Well, pushing the stomach out to breathe, right? Which we're already taught. And I remember teaching opera singers, and they were really adamant that you ought to breathe from your stomach and push the stomach out, and to have real battles with them that you haven't got lungs in your stomach. So you're breathing, they're in your back. I think the point is that I think all the methods probably meet in the middle, or the framing of them is different language, and it can be confusing when you're talking in different languages.
Definitely. And that's also one of the reasons why I think it's so important to find a teacher and practice with a teacher, because there are differences in the teachings. Like even the way Pattabhi Jois taught pranayama and the practices that he taught were quite different from the teachings that I was learning with Sri O.P. Tiwari in the Kavalyadam lineage. And you don't really want to mix methods. So I think when you start mixing methods, especially with pranayama, you can get a little bit mixed up and confused. So you should kind of stick with one lineage, one tradition, and not just like make your own smoothie out of all the different types of practices. Because then, they do have different effects on the body and on the mind. So
the other question that's always asked seems like it's, in my mind, slightly trifling question really, but people are very concerned about whether to practice pranayama before practice or after practice. That's the number one question I get asked. What's your thoughts on this?
You're right. That is one of the number one questions, I think.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the main thing when if you're doing especially like a traditional pranayama practice, that's maybe a little bit more than just inhaling and exhaling for double, which you can do at any point during the day, that very simple breathing exercise. But if you're doing something with retentions where you're holding the breath, you're doing a little bit more involved pranayama exercise, it's similar to the asana practice in that you definitely don't want to have a full stomach. So you want your stomach to be empty. So if you've had a meal, you need to wait about 4 hours so that you've digested the food. Because the process of digestion, when you're digesting food, you want the blood flow to be there and the digestive process not to be interrupted by holding the breath or, diverting the energy or the blood to other places in the body. So yeah, you just don't want to interfere with your digestion. And also, it's going to limit your ability to hold the breath if your stomach's full, right? So the main thing is that the stomach's empty. But for me, I enjoyed doing the pranayama practice first thing in the morning because I find that's when I'm the clearest and I have the most energy. And usually when I finish doing asana practice, I'm sort of like over it and just want to like move on with my life and my day. But it really doesn't matter, to be honest, whether you do it before or after. The thing is trying to find a time that works for you and feels natural and comfortable. Some people like doing the asana first because they feel like it opens up their body. It opens up, their nadis, maybe these energy channels more so that they can then sit and move the energy. But you can do the same thing through the pranayama. And then all of a sudden, when you go into your asana practice, if you're doing it after the pranayama practice, you have a really intense awareness of breath and bandhas, and your asana practice feels much more deeper. So
we know that
both have benefits.
A lot of people in my store we know likes to do it after the practice for an hour in the change room.
Yeah.
When other people try to get in, they would be doing the pranayama with.
Yes.
Very
yeah. Pattabhi Jois usually taught it after the asana practice. Yeah. He taught pranayama to do it afterwards.
What kind of time span are we looking at here? If you've only got like an hour and a half and you want to do an hour and a half asana, but you can't, like how should the split happen, Or do we need to do pranayama for sure, or is it a choice situation? Or if you're doing asana, do you really need to do, how essential is it, would you say, after how many years you practice,
Well, I always think that it's really important that you go with where your heart's leading you. So, if you're feeling called to sit and do a pranayama practice and move more into that fourth limb of the Ashtanga path, then I think it's important that you follow that leading and make some time for it. But of course, like with everything, every practice you do is going to take time, right? So yeah, we want to do the chanting, we want to do the meditation, we want to do the pranayama, we want to do the asana, but not many of us have 4 hours a day to practice yoga, right? So you kind of have to figure out which practices are creating the most benefit and what's the minimum amount of practice you need to do in each area in order to get those benefits, or get the effects or the results that you're looking for.
What do you reckon? Start off with like 10, 15 minutes a day? I mean, the ballpark figures?
Yeah, I think 10 minutes a day is quite good to start with. Yeah.
What is the ideal time of pranayama in your?
Well, it really depends. It depends on each person and what their commitment is to their practice. And also, of course, as your breath length increases and as your breath holds increase, right? The length of the practice also increases.
Oh, so you're holding your breath so long, it'll take you hours now. You're so good at that.
No. But yeah, you have to kind of, it's going to grow naturally. That's the thing. So if you started with 5 or 10 minutes, you could do the same practice, but over time, it would probably end up growing to like 15, 20 minutes.
Right. And finally, you've mentioned to me before that you've had past experience with helping conditions using the pranayama. Do you want to mention your past experience with that?
For me personally, when I was traveling a lot, I started to kind of build up this chronic stress response, which shows up as inflammation in the body, which is like swelling and tenderness and just like feeling really thick and sore joints and not sleeping good. I mean, I wasn't sleeping good because I was changing time zones a lot. And so the cortisol levels, which are the stress hormone, when they increase and don't go back down, then it starts to build up this inflammation. And so I was having all kinds of issues coming up with, especially my joints lacking range of motion and swelling. And if I got injured at all, it would like take forever to heal. And sometimes it wouldn't even heal. It would just stay swollen. So, working more directly with the breathing and the pranayama, changing my diet a little bit, taking out some foods, putting in more of other types of foods, and then also doing a bit more chanting, looking at ways to really stimulate the vagus nerve to increase vagal tone, to decrease inflammation in the body. Practicing asana in a way that was like a little bit more gentle and less athletic. So all of these little tweaks really in my own sort of routine really helped to change that level of inflammation. And all of a sudden my joints were like coming back down to a normal size because they were all swollen. I couldn't even like put certain rings on my fingers anymore. My ankles, which were like incredibly painful, I couldn't squat in Pashasana at all. Started to like come back down to a place where I can at least like squat without pain.
Great.
There's all kinds of really intense physical things that I was experiencing that I'd never experienced before.
And you mentioned the foods as well. People always say, "Oh, don't eat dairy. That's very bad for breathing." Is that?
Yeah.
It gives phlegm. Or are there any food? There's quite a kind of tantalizing mention of the food there. You didn't allude to foods that help or hinder.
Yeah.
Specifics on that?
Well, one of the things that's really helpful is increasing the omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're vegan, this can sometimes be a bit of a challenge because mostly omega-3 fatty acids are found in fish or fish oils. But, you can find vegan sources in flaxseed. But that was really helpful. And also I did a bit of an elimination diet for a month where I cut out all grains, which again, if you're vegan or vegetarian can be really challenging, especially because if you're not eating rice or any kind of grain at all, not quinoa, nothing, which was surprising to me because, I wasn't sure that was really the problem or that would really help, but it actually, I think, was one of the things that really helped. So taking out all grains and taking out all dairy. And what else? Oh, and then oils. So using only like the oils that are high in omega-3s and decreasing the ones that are high in omega-6s. But also you can, like olive oil is good, but like most vegetable oils are not so good. And of course, trans fat, all those types of things. So it was a month of just really sort of fresh vegetables and some tofu and tempeh and things that, and I took out all the sugar also. So that was another thing. Again, if you're vegetarian, it's like you're not eating any fruits now. You're basically eating salad.
Yeah.
And a lot of cauliflower and broccoli.
Like an anti-candida diet in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's pretty much the same thing because candida feeds off that sugar, which shows up, our body synthesizes the grains into sugars, right? So, yeah. So that was the way that I changed my diet. And then you can slowly add things back in and your body doesn't react. You can kind of see what's causing certain reactions or not. And also I think we just get to a place when we're really stressed, when our body's overly stressed or the inflammation's sort of chronic, that every little thing just flares up a reaction. We become hypersensitive to everything. And so you kind of have to get rid of the inflammation first in the body before you can then go back to, sort of a normal type diet or eating, again, things that you would normally eat without it causing a reaction.
Okay, just to finish off, I got a personal question for you. I was just thinking, my mum, if she's listening, she has listened to some of them. So if she's listening to this, hi mum. And she always told me, when I sit to breathe, I feel anxious. And I immediately feel anxious when I focus on my breathing. I don't know. I didn't really have an answer for her. And I wondered if someone just feels very reluctant, to commence the pranayama practice proper. Are there any tips? But, I kind of felt it would be good for her as well. There are any tips or maybe asanas that you can breathe in to take the emphasis of the actual physical idea of breathing? I think she felt she was just going to suffocate or something.
I definitely know some people, have a lot of anxiety that come up.
When you start breathing, it comes up worse. I think that was the message I was getting.
Yeah. There's one breathing exercise, Brahmari Pranayama, that could be helpful where you inhale and then you exhale with the humming sound.
Okay. It's quite soothing.
Like the humming bee. Yeah. It's like, it has a similar effect to even just chanting Om or even just chanting, but that sound from the Om. So that humming bee can be quite soothing, and you don't really think of it as breathing in a way, right? You think of it as humming. And so you're taking a nice deep inhale and then just exhaling with the humming sound for as long as you possibly can. And do that maybe 10 times, right? And that'll probably take you 2 minutes. But that can help to sort of calm that anxiety. And it's, again, quite soothing. And you're also stimulating with the humming sound. It's a direct stimulation of that vagus nerve because it goes through the larynx and the vocal cords there. And so you're, again, going to start to increase the parasympathetic nervous system response, which will immediately start to decrease the anxiety. So it's a little bit more of a stronger method because of the humming sound. Right. It really taps into that vagal tone or to toning the vagus nerve. And then she could also, another thing is like the loving kindness or the metta meditation is another nice way to kind of ease into pranayama practice if you're not really wanting to practice pranayama, or if it makes you feel anxious. Just sitting and just, your breath will naturally start to become slower and longer, and repeating the loving kindness, whatever works for you. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy and free, or whatever words you want to use. And then offering that to other people around you or a group or a community. So all of those, that kind of loving kindness meditation, acting with compassion, has also been shown to help us switch out of that sympathetic response, right? That fight or flight response, and move into a more restful place of ease inside our nervous system.
Okay, Mum, if you're listening, let me know how it goes. And Harmony, I think that's fantastic instruction of the pranayama, and I shall give links in our write-up for that. So thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. Well, I hope you loved this conversation. And if you are excited about diving into some simple, very accessible, very beginner pranayama breathwork exercises that are guaranteed to help you fall asleep with ease and stay asleep, feeling clear and energized in the morning, to also get things done with less feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, feeling maybe like you even have time to spare. You can fit in an extra practice or walk or something fun with your family at the end of the day. And also find this source of abundant energy that you can tap into, so you can just have a more joyful, more peaceful presence and really enjoy the quality time you have with the people you love. Then come into my free 5-day breathwork challenge. We are going. We're in day 2. There is still 3 days left and a bonus day on Saturday morning. Plus, you'll be able to catch up on all of the replays and keep the replays when you join us. So don't delay. Come inside, join my free 5-day challenge, and join me live or watch the replays. It's only 10 minutes of teaching, 10 minutes of practice each day, and it's going to give you the foundational breathwork practices that you can use. You can implement breathing throughout your day. You could set up a regular time in the morning or in the evening. You could do all of those things above, even better, right? Little small mini micro breaks throughout your day to help you tap into a greater sense of feeling grounded, centered, and more conscious. And that really starts to shift and change things in your physical body, as well as your spiritual body, your mental and emotional experience of life and time, and increase your energy. So I hope that you join us. Come on in. There's still time. The free 5-day breathwork challenge. You can find the link in the show notes or send me a DM at Harmony Slater Official. I will send you the link. You can also find the link in my Instagram bio as well. So many places, so much fun. We are having an amazing time inside the Finding Harmony community with this challenge. So I hope you'll join. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.